Right? So this whole issue of squads and guilds, this whole move into keeping teams small and nimble, right, falls into this question also of, are they employers or employees, or are they contractors?
Analyzing, it's a fascinating idea to analyze the company not just as headcount and departments, but almost like as a network where you have single point of failure. And if you lose that single point of failure, you're in big trouble. And instead to basically have those cells, those units that are business driven, outcome driven, that you can have in hybrid employment models to drive results. That's a really
And this goes
interesting
into, like,
idea.
the distributed computing models, right, which have built kind of the whole scale of the internet today is built on this concept of distributed computing in many ways, right? And but companies still have this single point of failure.
Right.
And a great example is, I hear this all the time, people trying to hire a like CTO, VP engineering that can scale the company. And they usually use the example of, I want the original VP engineering of Amazon. That's usually the example they always like to say. Like that
Yeah.
person who saw Amazon go from 300 to 10,000 people, right? Well, that person is probably richer than anyone, almost anyone in the world, and that person is probably not going to join your company anyway. So the fact that you want to hire that person is great, but that person is not for sale, right? And
Yeah.
so you're probably going to end up hiring someone has never done it or has done it weekly, and it's going to take you 6 months if you're lucky to find this person, another 6 months to discover he or she is the wrong person,
Yeah.
and then fire them. It'll take another 3 months, and then start again 6 months. I mean, so this idea of these huge managers that run these huge organizations, when a company's scaling, is very, very hard. At status quo, when you've got a large organization, it's growing 3% a year, whether or not it's led by someone is kind of less important, right? Everybody knows what they're doing running forward. But when you're growing and you're scaling and you have these few key people that are so important, and your odds of hiring the right people are so low because of what's going on in the market, you need to have redundancy built in. You need to distribute the leadership.
It's interesting. We're learning from companies I work with, particularly the fast growing unicorns, and some of them are doing it in really interesting ways. I think the view is that the senior leadership is actually coaches and supporters, but the power is within the teams that need to be cross-functional, autonomous, have everything they need to accomplish their goals, with the CTO, VP engineering, etc., just basically supporting the different groups. And that has an interesting effect where the company can work on many more things, because coaching and supporting function, that's rather scalable. You spend a couple hours with this team and that team, etc. You track progress, you help figure out resourcing, things like that. But otherwise, you can be across many, many different initiatives at once. And the engineer and product people that are on those teams benefit from being effectively like mini startups, where they know everybody around them. Coordination is lessened because you don't need to go from, if I'm an engineer, I don't have to talk to my leader, talk to their leader, all the way to the CTO, then to the CPO, and then all back. I basically have everything I need in my small group, and things move fast and I feel better. Like in remote settings,
Let
yeah,
me, sorry, let me interrupt you
please.
here. Like, so we did that move at Waze when we broke up from one large engineer group to squads and things like
Oh,
that.
interesting.
And it was extremely hard to do, and we made lots of mistakes. And one of the biggest problems is you need to engineer the company from day one for this. Because for teams to be efficient, they have to be independent, meaning they control all their inputs. Now, what usually happens in traditional models is, for example, kind of one user database that everybody accesses, right?
Right.
Okay, who adds a field to that database? Who decides, right? When you begin thinking about teams, it should be an authentication API that you call. But that requires engineering your architecture that way, so that every team can call the authentication API and not deal directly with the database, right? So to be able to build these teams and to be independent, you need to have a kind of culture of APIs and a rigid architecture of APIs with very flexible control within the APIs. So that means, for example, every team might have its own database. And it might be a replication of functions that exist in other parts of the company, which might be inefficient from a kind of a specific team level, but hyper efficient for the squad, because they can now do whatever they want database without having to wait for another team to deliver something. So this is why if you want to work this way, you've got to architect your infrastructure early on to support this. It's got to be a value of the company that these teams are independent. And that means that even if you do things that are not elegant from a technology perspective, they're very elegant from a team independence. And there's a conflict. So what's more important, the independence of the team or the elegance? The amount of servers that you waste or the amount of independence that each team can? Do you standardize on one language that's easier to train new employees, or you allow every team select their own language because for whatever challenge you're doing, different languages have different values that you might want to do, but then it's harder to train people. So these are all the kinds of questions and the trade-offs you have to think about when you think strategically about building a distributed team, a company built on distributed teams. Another interesting thing becomes the question of on-site and off-site. The worst situation is if you have a team where half the team is working from home and half are on-site.
Right.
Because neither side get the value.